obsessed with tractors, and this the sea of orange tractors just amplifies. It's been tractors in the mind since that moment. But Madam Chair, if you permit, I do have a new business item. So this board has been asked recently to by community members to take a look at Senate Bill 3158, the Child Abuse Reporting Expansion Act, the CARE Act. I think a good place to start with that would be to ask our county attorney to give us his assessment of that legislation. So, Madam Chair, if you permit, I'd like to ask Mr. Button to address the board on that.
Good evening, everyone. You all are aware that I can be rather long. That was a rather open-ended question, so I will try to keep my comments under 5,000 watts. The CAR Act, or CARE Act, is an act that has been brought forward before the New York State Legislature 3 times in the last 4 years. So the purpose is to designate members of clergy as first reporters, mandated reporters. The stated purpose, as it would seem, would be to require that individuals that work within church settings who are aware of some reported abuse or an allegation of abuse be required to report it, much like the caseworker would. If you drill down into the bill, though, it's a little more complicated than that, especially if you understand the workings of a church setting, specifically Protestant settings and evangelical church settings. While I think the bill's purpose is fairly laudable, which is to at least stated purpose, prevent the potential that child abuse or sex abuse of minors could occur within a church setting. The draft and the foundation, fundamental nature of the bill really goes to attack certain aspects of truths that I think our society has held for centuries. In fact, it was a recognized truth long before our country became a country, and that is known as the penitent priest exception. The penitent priest exception is largely premised on the notion that even upon your deathbed, even upon your last moments, you may go to a priest, confess your sins, and be absolved of said sins. The notion rises from the third individual rising on the cross and passing away at the time that Jesus did on Golgotha. This notion that you can relay at the last moment your sin and be forgiven. Buried inside the bill is language, especially concerning for Protestant Christians. The bill would make it such that anyone that works within a church setting, any administrative requirement, be designated as one of those mandated reporters. This would naturally encounter in a Protestant setting, encapsulate secretarial staff, would encapsulate all members who may be on the body of said church. So both the breadth of this design for Protestant Christians, as well as the impact to a fundamental truth of the ability to confess within a church setting, poses some very significant difficulties for churches, despite the fact that it has at least its stated goal of a very lawful purpose. I think that's the explanation that I can provide.
Mr. Reagan.
For those religions that have the sacrament of confession, how would this affect their priests who have a person come to the confessional and confess their sins? It's my understanding that under the vow of secrecy that they agree to when they become priests, that they will go to jail before violating the sanctity of the confessional.
This bill would arguably make that unlawful. They would have to violate that tenant of confidentiality and disclose those materials under the same rubric of evaluation that a caseworker or a teacher would have to. If they became aware of information that appeared to be actionable or had a reasonable basis for reporting to law enforcement, they would be under a responsibility to disclose that material. I think the difficulty becomes that, as having gone through it, having documented reporter training myself, there are many circumstances where you would rather err on the side of caution and disclose than miss something that you should not. Under a priest circumstance, that could result significantly in limiting the penitent priest exception or that confidentiality is fine.
Under the First Amendment, that guarantees freedom of religion, wouldn't this violate, one of our most fundamental rights as Americans to practice our religion without government interference?
I cannot definitively say yay or nay, but I would definitely believe that this would be subject to challenge. I definitely believe that individual under the right circumstances could demonstrate that it would have both a harmful and interfering effect on the practice and performance of religion within a religious setting. So I could see significant challenges to it. Obviously, I'll leave it up to the court to decide whether or not it does.
I mean, one of the most, fundamental rights of Americans has always been our right as Americans to practice our religions without the government judging and siding with, saying, well, you can't practice your religion this way or that. It just seems to raise certain very troubling questions and objections in my mind.
Thank you. Legislator Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to get down to the nitty gritty on this. We're talking about children being sexually abused. We had a heinous case in this county involving an organization who protected an offender. I think if we had our district attorney in here, he'd have a different take on this situation where the perpetrators were allegedly protected and they didn't have access to victims. I'm a mandated reporter. There are other mandated reporters in this room. I understand the argument. I'm a Catholic, okay? When you go to confession, it's secret. But when we get down to what we're talking about children being sexually abused. I have a problem with this.
Mr. Burke.
I guess I'm wondering why, is there a consideration of sending a message down to Albany that we are opposed to this, or is this just, are we just chatting?
We have not gotten that far in our discussion.
Well,
I don't know if
I guess
Is there a motion on the floor?
is there.
Point of order, then I think this discussion's out of order.
what discussion?
Whatever it is we're discussing, if there's no motion on the floor.
Are we done with Mr. Button?
Huh?
Are we done with Mr. Button? Thank you, Mr. Button. If there is no further new or old business, do we have a need for executive session?
We do for litigation.
negotiations and personnel, which is to discuss the medical, financial credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters relating to the appointment, employment, motion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation. And I would ask that Sheriff Bigworth be allowed to stay from executive section, and Matt Denham been requested to stay by the chair. May I have a motion from Mr. Forsyth, second from Mr. Hall, all in favor of going into executive session? Is there any other business to come before this board?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, second by Mr. Craig.